Going down, 1862 going down.
A 747 cargo jet plunges into an apartment complex.
Cut it like a knife.
LL 1862, mayday, mayday.
Amid wild rumors,
There was speculation that a missile had struck the aircraft.
We need those black boxes!
crash investigators search for the cause of the Netherlands' worst air disaster.
There was a lot of pressure to come up with some findings as quickly as possible.
The only trouble is, the investigators didn't know the answers, which were simply not available.
Preventing an even greater disaster may now be a race against time.
We were extremely worried and concerned that the next airplane might have been a passenger airplane.
It's a quiet Sunday evening at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport.
Everybody ready for takeoff?
It's all looking good.
An El Al cargo jet is fueled and ready to depart for Tel Aviv.
LL 1862, good evening.
Good evening, LL 1862. Line up in sequence 01 left.
Roger.
The Boeing 747 is loaded with 126 tons of freight. The crew is under the command of Yitzhak Fuchs. Like all El Al pilots, he earned his wings in the Israeli military.
He was many years in the company already, and they flew for the Air Force at first. So I believe he had something like 25,000 hours of flying.
How's our fuel?
Yeah, more than enough for a 4-hour flight.
Gedalia Sofer is the flight engineer. It's his job to monitor the performance of the aircraft, including the engines and fuel consumption.
The flight engineer was also very, very experienced, very professional, flying with the company many years. I think he was about to retire at that time.
LL 1862 is clear for takeoff. 01 left.
Clear for takeoff 01 left, Roger. Arnon, she's all yours.
Thanks, Yitzhak.
First Officer Arnon Ohad will be handling the controls for this flight.
On the roll.
The legs of the flight are divided by both captains and first officer to get the same experience.
The freighter's 4 massive Pratt & Whitney engines pump out 200,000 pounds of thrust.
V1. Rotate.
The visibility was good. It was cool, but there was no weather to worry about.
Gear up.
Gear up.
It was a routine flight back to base.
Flight 1862 will now head east over the suburbs of Amsterdam, then turn south to fly across Central Europe before landing in Tel Aviv.
LL 1862, climb flight level 210.
Flight level 210, Roger.
The controller clears them for a climb to 21,000 feet.
Engines are looking good. Climb power set.
It's quite normal and routine climbing out of the airport. They were expecting to be home at about 4 hours.
Everything seems normal for the first 7 minutes of flight.
What the hell?
What happened was not only dramatic, it was completely sudden. There was no warning whatsoever.
The 747 is rolling violently to the right, and the crew has no idea why.
I have control.
You have control.
The captain takes over flying the plane.
The wings are banking to the right.
So far, what can you tell me?
Engines 3 and 4 are out.
Both engines on the right wing have suddenly died.
This is a very dramatic situation. The wing where the engines have failed drops, and the other wing rises.
We need to level off.
Working on it.
The captain struggles to bring the plane level.
We're losing hydraulics on system 3. No, 3 and 4.
Critical flight controls are failing.
The hydraulics power the controls. This is such a big airplane that pilots can't control it with muscle alone.
Full left rudder.
The only way you can get the aircraft level and straight again is to put the rudder on with your left foot and try and pick up the right wing.
Wings coming up.
Captain Fuchs can barely control the plane.
Speedbird 943, climb flight level 280.
At Schiphol Air Traffic Control, the evening routine is about to be shattered.
LL 1862. Mayday, mayday, we have an emergency.
They realize right away that they're in a real bad situation.
LL 1862, do you wish to return to Schiphol?
Affirmative. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Turn right, heading 260.
The crew now has a heading back to the airport, but with hydraulics failing, the captain is having more and more difficulty controlling the plane.
Watch your pitch.
Then the crisis gets much worse.
We have a fire number 3.
A new warning tells the crew one of the engines is on fire.
Shutting down engine 3.
We have a fire in engine 3.
Roger.
You've got to get the fire out quickly, because if fire starts, that's serious, because it will structurally damage the airplane very rapidly.
Number 3 fire extinguisher. Pull it.
The crew triggers the fire extinguisher and waits for it to douse the flames.
They had not only to keep control of this really stricken airplane, they also had to go through the routine for putting the fire out.
Okay, we still have a fire warning.
The procedure has no effect. The crew can't see their engines from the cockpit. They have no idea how bad the fire might be.
When it doesn't work, we are getting into real pressure to put the aircraft back on the ground very quick.
We need to land, see if they can get us down on runway 27.
We have a fire in engine 3. Engine 3 and 4 inoperative. Request runway 27 for landing.
The captain knows the airport. He wants to land on the longest runway at Schiphol.
In that case, heading 360, heading 360.
Roger, 360.
It's the pilot who decides what can be done, especially with an airplane which is as badly stricken as this one. The air traffic controller's job is to facilitate that request from the air.
That'll give you a right turn to cross the localizer. You only have 7 miles to go from current position.
Damn it.
The crew is now facing another huge challenge.
There's no way we can slow down at this distance. We're gonna have to go around again.
Agreed.
They're too close to the airport to slow down in time to land. Captain Fuchs decides to make a descending turn over Amsterdam so he can lose speed and altitude before coming into land.
They have no power on the right side, no hydraulics.
These pilots had an aeroplane which was scarcely flyable, but they didn't know why.
There's skip around 3 o'clock.
Got it.
The crew has to make one final turn to line up with the runway.
1862, your speed is.
Speed is 260.
Despite the unexplained damage to his plane, Fuchs manages to guide the 747 toward the runway.
Very difficult controlling the aircraft in this situation, but they control the aircraft the full 360 degrees back.
Speed's a little high. Are we stable enough to make the runway?
We'll see.
The crew has no doubt. This will be the riskiest landing they've ever attempted.
Here we go.
Flight 1862 is less than 3 minutes from landing.
All right, let's get the gear down.
Gear down, 3 green.
Amsterdam's airport is tantalizingly close.
Reducing speed.
Captain Yitzhak Fuchs slows his plane and calls for the flaps.
Flaps 2.
He wants to increase the wing's surface area.
Flaps 2.
To add lift at the slower speed he needs for landing.
All right, nice and easy. 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 No, 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 no!
We're losing it.
The plane is once again rolling to the right, and this time it's worse.
The pilot realized that by going slower, he was having even more control problems than he already had.
LL, further right heading 310. Heading 310.
Controllers urge the pilots to correct their course to the runway.
I can't hold it! I can't hold it!
We have a controlling problem.
They realized that their aircraft was uncontrollable.
No, no, no! Come on!
Going down. Going down, 1862 going down. Going down.
Come on!
Hit the building and cut it like a knife.
El Al 1862 has slammed into an 11-story apartment block. The Bail Mamir apartment complex, home to thousands of people, is engulfed in flames.
You prepare yourself for a lot of things, but this was more than I ever expected.
Henk von Roy is one of hundreds of Amsterdam firefighters who rush to the crash site.
When I arrived there and I looked at the flat, and there was a big hole in it, and it was a massive fire. It's the biggest fire I've ever seen in my life.
The intensity of the inferno is overwhelming.
The cargo plane was fueled up in Schiphol with 80 tons of kerosene.
Rescuers race to pull the injured to safety. In the chaos, it's hard to know how many victims there actually are.
I was expecting 200 people dead, dus killed, and 600 people injured.
The next morning, daylight reveals the overwhelming scale of the disaster.
It it was traumatic to see the damage and what it did to the people living there.
The plummeting jet has cut the apartment block completely in two. There's almost nothing left of the plane. No one aboard has survived.
It was quite clear that a lot of lives had been lost on the ground, let alone in the air.
Though the exact number isn't yet known, dozens are dead. The eyes of the world soon focus on the Netherlands' worst ever aviation disaster.
The spectacular nature of this accident was such that, all the cameras were quickly there.
The Dutch government assigns Pim van Santen to the crash investigation.
How soon can I get my team in here?
Thank you.
He's well aware that his entire nation will soon be demanding answers.
There was a lot of pressure, both from the public, from the press, to come up with some findings as quickly as possible.
Van Santen faces a frustrating delay. He's not allowed to examine the debris until rescuers complete their search for victims in the demolished building.
We're just waiting. They're clearing out the bodies.
We were basically walking around and getting as close as possible without disturbing the rescue people.
For now, vital evidence remains out of reach.
Go ahead, please.
With the crash site off limits, Van Santen turns to recordings made by Schiphol Air Traffic Control on the night of the accident.
LL 1862, Mayday, Mayday. We have an emergency.
LL 1862, do you wish to return to Schiphol?
It's not as detailed as the cockpit recording, but does capture the conversations between controllers and the El Al crew.
60.
You hear those people speaking, and that makes it very, for me at least, made it very emotional. You hear people speaking, but you also know that they are dead.
We have a controlling problem.
The recording reveals just how quickly the disaster unfolded.
LL, further right heading 310, heading 310.
It captures the terrible moment when the crew lost control of their plane.
Going down, 1862, going down.
But what triggered the crisis remains a mystery.
This isn't getting us anywhere. We need to find those flight recorders.
We didn't hear anything which was really directing us at the actual cause. The only thing what was obvious was that the airplane was no longer controllable.
Van Santen pins his hopes on recovering the plane's black boxes. Every 747 carries a flight data recorder and a cockpit voice recorder in the tail. They capture detailed information about everything the pilots say and do during the flight. But finding those recorders won't be easy. City officials have ordered the crash debris to be trucked to dump sites around Amsterdam.
The city wanted to have the crash site cleaned as quickly as possible, because for the people living there who may have lost relatives, it was extremely traumatic to see these buildings and parts of the airplane.
Dig in, guys! We need those black boxes!
Robert Benson is a veteran investigator with the US National Transportation Safety Board. He joins the team and knows just how crucial the voice and data recorders can be.
We use those extensively, along with examination of wreckage, to nail down almost to an nth degree what happened sometimes.
Investigators face a difficult search through a tangled mess of pulverized aircraft parts and building debris.
Hang on. That's an engine part. Goes over there.
You'd be surprised how much building debris, pipes and things can actually look like airplane parts. It gets confusing.
While investigators sort through the mountains of debris, witness reports provide a stunning lead.
The earliest information that I think the investigators had, which gave them clues that there was more to this crash than just the pilots losing power on two engines, was that witnesses saw things happening to the airplane and they reported this.
Just minutes before the crash, they saw what looked like two jet engines falling into Lake Hoymyr, east of the airport.
For an engine to fall off the wing of an airplane, it's not unheard of, but it's very, very unusual.
So far, what can you tell me?
Engines 3 and 4 are out.
Losing two engines for us was... We've never heard of that before.
Two engines in this lake. Let's find them, please.
Two engines were missing, and that became the focus of the investigation.
Divers immediately take to the water in search of the fallen debris. What they find could solve this mystery. Meanwhile, across Amsterdam, rumors begin to spread. Speculation about what could have torn two engines from a 747.
Well, the fact that the aircraft was an Israeli company, El Al, led to early speculation that there may have been some kind of terrorist involvement.
The history of conflict between Israel and its Arab neighbors suggests a terrifying possibility.
There was early speculation that a missile had struck the aircraft.
Other rumors hint the 747 might have been carrying explosive military cargo for the Israeli army. Cargo not listed on the official manifest.
Oh, El Al must have been sabotage. Must have been. Might have been a missile. They were going for absolutely every possible explanation. The people standing in front of the cameras had to have something to say, so they said it.
Within hours, the search of Lake Hoymyr pays off. Investigators recover one of Flight 1862's right side engines. A look at the serial number reveals its engine number 4. The 747's engines are numbered from left to right. Number 4 is the outermost engine on the right wing. Searchers also recover debris from the forward edge of the right wing. Control surfaces that are crucial for controlling the plane.
We've got...
The loss of leading-edge components, flaps and slats, led us to believe that the aircraft was extremely difficult to fly safely.
The mystery now is what caused the engines to fall off. Was it terrorism, a mechanical failure, or something else? Investigators rush the recovered wreckage to a forensic lab and test it for explosive residue.
You have to look at every single part to either rule it in or out.
But there's no evidence of any explosion.
We looked at every single part and ruled out a missile.
One thing is now certain. The El Al disaster has nothing to do with terrorism. But with Engine 3 still missing, the case is far from being solved.
Finding both engines was a virtual necessity. We had other parts of the aircraft, of course, that went into the apartment complex, but they were heavily damaged, so we needed all the parts of the puzzle that we could possibly locate.
Take a look at this.
News of another recent accident adds grave urgency to the search.
I think the whole fleet could be in danger.
Investigators learn of another 747 that lost 2 engines and crashed just 9 months earlier.
It quickly became apparent that a similar accident occurred in Taiwan to a China Airlines 747. Very similar, in fact.
It suddenly seems possible that the 747 may have a deadly design flaw.
That scares everybody because there were 1,000 747s out there at the time.
We were extremely worried and concerned that if this was a pattern, that the next airplane might have been a passenger airplane.
Thousands of lives could be at risk. Investigators must work quickly to find out what brought down Flight 1862. The crash of a 747 near the heart of Amsterdam has shocked people all across that city. The Netherlands' Queen Beatrix tours the devastation, sharing in her nation's grief. At least 43 people are dead.
A lot of people died, but it could have been much worse than that.
Pressure builds to find evidence. With Engine 3 still missing, investigators call in the Dutch Navy to search Lake Hoijmeer using sonar.
It is not very deep there, maybe 4 or 5 meters, but that is deep enough to make it difficult to find.
3 days into the investigation, a major breakthrough. Searchers find a black box in the debris. It's the flight data recorder.
Okay. Let's see what the lab can do with this.
It should contain detailed information about the operation of the engines. But getting at that data may be impossible. The huge impact has taken a heavy toll on the critical recording device.
The FDR survived the accident, but it certainly wasn't intact.
The tape is badly damaged.
The tape had shattered upon impact in a couple places.
But von Santen and his team are determined. They ship the recorder to Washington, where NTSB experts will try to repair the damage. More than a week after the Netherlands' worst air disaster, there's still no sign of the second black box, the cockpit voice recorder.
Any luck?
It looks like investigators will have to solve this mystery without one of their best tools.
You have to remember there was a giant pile of rubble mixed in with an entire 747. It never showed up. My guess is that it probably was burned into a little cinder.
Underwater searchers are having better luck. They've found and recovered engine number 3. Investigators now have both the engines from the right side of the plane. But a close examination of the newly recovered engine only adds to the mystery.
Visual exam shows no sooting, no signs of fire.
We have a fire number 3.
In spite of what the flight crew said over the radio, there were absolutely no evidence of sooting, melted metal, things like that inside the engines.
Shutting down engine 3.
Whatever went wrong, it not only caused the engines to separate from the wing, it also triggered a false fire alarm that misled the crew.
All they had to go on were lights and indications in the cockpit. I don't think they ever knew that they were missing 2 engines.
Investigators hope an unusual streak of paint found on the cowling of engine 3 will help explain what really happened. They take a sample of the paint for testing.
Let's see if the lab can tell us where this came from.
While they wait for lab results, investigators turn their attention to the fittings that attach the engines to the wing. Known as pylons, they're designed to be strong enough to support the massive engines during all the rigors of flight.
If the airplane is in turbulence in the sky and the whole airplane is being shaken, the engines are being shaken as well, so the pylons have to be very, very strong.
V1?
Investigators know Flight 1862 powered away safely from the runway.
Rotate.
They wonder, did the 747 hit something in the air that somehow damaged the two right-side engine mounts? Air Force radar scans from the night of the crash reveal some intriguing data.
So these blue areas are all flocks of birds? Wow.
There were unusually large flocks of birds around the airport the night of the crash.
One of the scenarios was that there was bird impact. In October, November, we have lots of geese flying around Schiphol Airport, and these are big birds.
Bird strikes can do incredible damage.
What the hell?
Finally, there might be an explanation.
I have control.
You have control.
For what tore two engines off El Al Flight 1862. To test the bird strike theory, the team turns to the science of light. When exposed to ultraviolet light, blood and other organic remains will glow green.
Looks clean.
But they can find no green fluorescence on any part of either engine. The investigation is back to square one.
Bird impact was ruled out. Fire was ruled out. So basically then the conclusion was it must have been something else.
So we know that
The media, of course, are putting pressure on them to answer questions. The only trouble is the investigators didn't know the answers either.
Then the investigation takes a dramatic turn. Lab results reveal the paint found on engine 3 came from the cone-shaped spinner at the front of another engine.
Get everyone together. I think I know what happened.
Von Santon believes there's only one scenario that can explain the bizarre finding.
Say, this is engine 3. Paint transfer is right there. No way engine 4 could come forward, but if engine 3 came off first, it could fly back and the spinner would hit right here.
As in an automobile accident, if you find paint of one color on a device made of another color, there's an indication that they struck each other.
In other words, engine 3 knocked engine 4 off the plane.
What the hell?
The 4-ton engine would have hit with the force of a small bulldozer.
Soper, what can you tell me?
Engines 3 and 4 are out.
It's a critical discovery, but it leaves a huge question unanswered. Why did engine 3 fall off in the first place? To try to solve that mystery, investigators need to find the lugs and bolts that connected that engine to the wing.
In terms of finding the evidence, the physical parts of the airplane, so that you could find out what broke and how it broke, was going to be difficult.
The engine fittings could have fallen to Earth at any point during the mid-air crisis. Or they could be buried in the rubble from the crash site.
You never have any guarantee that you will find all the parts which are needed to determine this most likely cause.
Almost 3 weeks after the crash, the investigation has hit a major hurdle. Though it's clear why the El Al crew declared a mayday.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Investigators still can't explain what started the deadly chain of events. Then they get a lucky break. A painstaking search through the crash debris has recovered some key components from the fitting that held Engine 3 to the plane, including one of 4 crucial bolts or fuse pins that secure the pylon to the wing and support the weight of the engine.
There was luck involved, definitely. And that was really, for us, the point where pieces are falling into place.
Investigators study the pieces in search of clues. A metallurgical scan leads to a stunning discovery. There's a 4mm crack on the inside of the hollow fuse pin.
We discovered that it had pre-existing fatigue cracks. If there's a micro crack in it, it weakens the entire structure and makes it easier to break.
Investigators theorize that as soon as one pin failed, the entire engine fitting broke apart. They suspect the crack is the result of simple wear and tear. Every takeoff and landing puts stress on the crucial pin.
Rotate.
Eventually, a tiny crack formed.
Climb power set.
Over time, the crack grew worse and worse.
It can grow slowly and slowly and slowly for years until finally the part breaks.
I have control.
And fatigue cracking is almost like a ticking time bomb going off.
There could be many more of those time bombs. Investigators studying the engine mount from the China Airlines crash determined that it too failed from metal fatigue.
These fuse pins were developing fatigue problems at a certain rate which was much faster than anybody had anticipated.
Just one final question remains for von Santen and his team. The 747 has 4 engines. Even with 2 engines gone, the El Al jet had enough power to fly back to the airport.
Of course, it's an emergency, half the power, but the aircraft is designed to do it, and we are practicing it in the simulator every time that we are making simulator.
Why was Captain Fuchs able to descend to within sight of the runway?
No, 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 come on! Going down!
But not able to land? NTSB technicians have been able to repair the damaged tape from the flight data recorder. Investigators scour the data, searching for answers.
It gave us a wealth of data. Airspeed, altitude, what control surfaces were doing, what hydraulic systems were still operating, a myriad of things.
With the new information,
Rotate.
Investigators hope finally to understand why El Al Flight 1862 never made it back to safety. Pim von Santen pieces together the fatal flight.
Okay, let's get started.
He combines flight data
Engines are working fine at takeoff.
with the recordings captured in the tower.
0, roger.
Engines are looking good. Climb power set.
Then, right here, the pylon fails. Engine 3 breaks away.
What the hell?
The sound had to be very, very loud. Perhaps
Hydraulic lines before hitting engine 4.
We're losing hydraulics on system 3. No, 3 and 4.
Need to level off. Working on it.
They have a lot of damage, but they're still controlling the plane.
When you've lost half of your hydraulic power, that makes the controls heavier and slower than they were before.
Hello, 1862. Mayday, mayday, we have an emergency.
The damage also causes a false alarm.
We have a fire in engine 3. Engine 3 and 4 inoperative.
There never was any fire.
They would have an indication in the cockpit that they would have a fire, but they couldn't verify that by looking at the engines, because you can't see them.
They put out their flaps to slow down.
Flaps too.
The flaps are designed to add lift at the lower speeds needed for landing.
Flaps don't go out on the right side.
With the plane's right side hydraulics so badly damaged, the right wing flaps can't extend as they should.
When the speed drops, so does the wing.
Easy. No, 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 no.
We're losing it.
More lift on the left, less on the right, causing a roll to the right. And as the aircraft slowed down, this rolling tendency got harder and harder to counteract.
I can't hold it. I can't hold it.
It's a lethal imbalance of aerodynamic force.
No, no, no. Come on.
Going down.
We could see that the airplane went into an uncontrolled rolling motion.
Come on.
Going down. 86 are going down. Going down.
As soon as they extended their flaps, it was all over.
In the aftermath, some wonder what might have happened if the El Al crew had known their true situation. That there could be no engine fire because they had no engines at all on the right side.
Skipper 3 o'clock.
Got it.
Their only option would have been a desperate one, choosing not to deploy their flaps on final approach. It would have meant trying a high-risk landing at nearly 350 miles an hour.
The likelihood of the airplane and the crew surviving and landing at that speed, which is more than twice the speed that airplanes normally land at, the likelihood of their surviving was practically zero.
43 dead because of one small part.
Investigators conclude that the accident that killed 43 people is the result of the faulty fuse pin.
It's very rare for the failure of one tiny little part like a fuse pin to actually bring down an airplane.
The Dutch-led team immediately calls on Boeing to redesign the critical engine fastener.
They very quickly went back to the drawing board.
New